Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you all once again to our Unnathi monthly meeting. Today is our 20th Unnathi monthly meeting. We are so glad and happy we could do this for the past 2 years. We thank you all for your participation in this meeting. We also look forward to have many more meetings and to spread awareness and to extend our support. Many of you know that December 3rd is the International Day for Persons with Disabilities. To mark this occasion, we have planned several awareness programs to support the person with disabilities. So, this week we have a special guest from Spandan, an inclusion and accessibility consultancy, my Miss Neha Trivedi.
Where she worked with fundraising, documentation, and team management. So, having worked in the space of disability from 2006, she decided to expertise and reach on to wider audience. So she went to the next level and she started an organization called Spandan, where she does inclusion and accessibility consultancy service. So today we have Miss Neha with us. Yeah, I'm handing over to Miss Neha, ma'am.
Thank you, Shweta. A very good evening to all of you. I just, before we start, wanted to have a quick check. Is everybody comfortable with English or would you need translation?
I think English we're comfortable with.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for having me. I am not 100% sure about what you're expecting out of this talk, but I'm just going to spend some time sharing my ideas on inclusive education specifically. I don't work with St. Xavier's College anymore. I was working there for the past 16 years. And I have, in September onwards this year, started my own venture called Spandan. I'll just quickly share my screen and just let me know if you're able to see it. And since it's a small group, I would be happy if anybody has any questions to stop me in the middle and ask me queries. Yeah? Y'all are able to see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, just to ask you all a question, the central, I mean, since your organization is called Justice and Hope, the central idea of justice, essentially in definition, is rightfulness, right? To do the right thing. And the central idea of hope is expecting or desiring something better. I have a question for all of you this evening. What do you believe is inclusion a matter of justice or hope? I mean, y'all can free to unmute yourself and share your thoughts on this.
It's a matter of justice.
Right. So for some of you, it might be a matter of justice. For some of you, it might be a matter of hope. For me and my journey, having worked in this space, and for Spandan, it's actually a matter of neither justice and hope. Inclusion for me is just a matter of reality, right? In our world, we have diversity all around us. We don't ever question why there are so many differences in landscapes. We don't question why there are so many different colors in this world. Diversity is actually inherent to nature's design, right? So my question through my work is to ask people, why is it that diversity in humans discomforts us so much? So for me, inclusion and accessibility is not a question of why, but rather a question of why not. Why should we not have inclusion and diversity? And oftentimes, when we work with people with disabilities on inclusion matters, the debate is always, please prove to us why we should do inclusion. Organizations, education institutes, corporates, they are trying to find the business case for inclusion. They're trying to find why should we do inclusion. And my simple answer to them is, why should we not do inclusion? Diversity is part of our lives and our society. So let us first find out, why are you so bothered by inclusion? And let's try and answer those questions. And that's like a better question to ask, right? Um, and for people with disabilities in all my engagements, um, for me, oftentimes, because people with disabilities are part of the same society, the doubts and misunderstandings about disabilities are also somehow seeped into lives of people with disabilities. Because, you know, just as families with people with disabilities or as individuals, we all are part of the same society. And if society is asking questions, we don't realize subconsciously when this becomes part of our own psychology as well, right? So, you know, when you're in an education institute and the question is, what can a student with blindness do? What can a student with orthopedic disability do? My answer to those questions is, instead of asking what can this person do, the question we should be encouraging people with disabilities to ask is, what do I want to do? Why should I limit my imagination to from what I want to what can I, right? Um, so there is this spectrum from asking ourselves what is possible, what is impossible, what is difficult, and this spectrum is often colored by our perception rather than our realities, right? We have a lot of fear, we have doubt. uh, Organizations have fear and doubt, can I take people with disabilities? People with disabilities themselves have fear and doubt, that will I be able to do this? And as people who work in the sector, for me, our journey is encourage as many stakeholders, whether it is organizations, whether it is people with disabilities, to move from the fear space to move to the space where we may not be sure as to what we can do, but let us figure it out, right? As a young person with disability, you may not know how society might embrace you. You might not be sure whether a particular college might take you. But instead of letting those doubts become fear and stop you from doing what you want to do, can we help individuals and organizations figure out what we can do and what we all can do together? And therefore, the question is, you know, where should adults with disabilities go to study and work? I'm sure all of you know that people with disabilities form the largest invisible minority in the world. 1 out of every 5 person is a person with disabilities. So just because we don't see people with disabilities does not mean they don't exist. And in India, the biggest challenge is with regards to literacy and education, right? So the literacy rate amongst people with disabilities is only 55% as against the national average of 75. And the most alarming figure for me as a professional is this, right? The All India Survey of Higher Education says that only 92,000 people with disabilities have access to a college degree. And if this is the truth, then how is employment going to be possible? How is independence going to be possible? And therefore, as people with disabilities, as a group of people who are involved in this project of yours, I would like to ask you a simple question. In your opinion, what should be the deciding factor for a person with disability to choose a career? What should be the key things that a person should consider before deciding they want to take up a career? Would anybody like to share? So you know, we have this typical news item that happens every time after 12 standard exams, after 10 standard exams. Such and such a student with disability, despite disability, got 90%. Such and such a student, despite disability, got 97%. And when these stories come out and these reporters come to colleges like the kinds that I worked earlier, the standard question that every reporter asks us is, what can a person with blindness do? What can a person with learning disability do? It's almost like we are making everything about this person's life to be the disability that they have. We are saying that if you have a particular disability, you can only do this much. And for me, that's a problem area of concern, right? So more often than not, people are forcing people with disabilities to make career choices based on the disability condition that they have. Whereas the only way to make a career choice is what are you interested in? What is your aptitude? Rather than who will give me admission and what disability I have, right? So a successful career cannot be built based on which college will give me admission or which is the career that I can do because the disability that I have. I have to make a decision based on what I'm good at and have the courage to open up the doors that may be a little hesitant in the beginning, but if I am passionate about something, then if I proceed that way, then chances are that it'll lead to success, right? I'm just going to show you some pictures. Is everybody game for a little bit of an activity? I'm going to show all of you some pictures and I just want your reactions on those pictures at the end of it, right? So I'm just going to show you some 5 images on the screen. This is one, which is a group of white sheep. This is a group of black sheep. This is a group of one black sheep amongst a group of white sheep. This is one single white sheep and a group of black sheep. And this is a mixed group of sheep. Can you all tell me amongst all the 5 images, when you see them, what does that make you feel? Can anybody type? People can type or unmute and talk. When you see these pictures, what are your initial emotions? And which are what made some of the odd sheep stand out? Can you all give me your thoughts on these 2 questions?
The last picture is about inclusion. They are all together.
Right. And if the last one is about inclusion and the others were seeming like they were about perhaps exclusion, what was leading to the exclusion according to you?
Just one person in that group.
Yeah, right. The standing, I mean, oftentimes, sorry, Shweta wants to say something?
It was the color.
Yeah. So I'm glad that both of you all have said 2 different things, and this is exactly what one wants to reflect on, right? So Shweta is saying that the thing that made one sheep stand out from the rest is color. And somebody else mentioned that it was the fact that that was a single sheep with that color in that group, right? And this is exactly what the inclusion, special and integration journey is about. We oftentimes land up making feel as though the color is the problem, that because this person has this color, this person is standing out. But it is not the color that is an issue. It is the fact that you are making only one person with one color stand in a group of people with other color. That is what is making it stand out. So inclusion is about ensuring that everyone can be together in one space and the color doesn't become an issue. In the last image where all the sheep were together, suddenly black or white didn't matter. But when people were not together, one thing will stand out. And that is why inclusion is so very important, right? Because as we said, people with disabilities are part of society. Diversity is part of society. We have segregated spaces, which is what is causing the problem rather than the differences themselves, right? So I just want to ask, play a short game and ask you to tell me who do you think this person is, okay? So assume that we're in the 1970s and I'm saying some 5 statements and tell me who does this represent, right? So if somebody is told you cannot go to school, you are told you cannot go out to work, you are told that you have to take care of the house, you are told if you did not know cooking, then you are worthless. Who do you think this person is in the 1970s?
The girls.
Yeah, right? Women, correct? And as per this logic, you, me, Shweta should not be here, right? Because we are defying all of this, correct? And we are in 2020, correct? So come to 2022, and who do you think this represents, right? We are saying not sure whether you can come to study. We are not sure if you will ever get a job. We think it's safest for you to be at home and we will take care of you. We will start some vocational training programs where we are sure you can do very well. Who do you think this represents in 2022?
It's disabled folks.
Right? So this is what, I mean, society told women something in 1970s and that did not hold true because it was not true. It was based on people's perception. Similarly, in society today, we are saying this to people with disabilities, but none of this is true either because it does not, it's based on our perception rather than reality, correct? So can you imagine what the world would look like in 2050. It's not going to look the same as it is today in 2022. Change is going to happen because change happens based on reality and not on perception. So the question that any adult with disability or any organization working with people with disabilities or any other organization that is hesitant towards inclusion, we should only be asking ourselves, change is going to happen regardless. Are we willing to go with it or are we trying to slow it down? That is the only choice that each of us as individuals have, right? And laws have already changed. So as all of you all might already be aware, we have a Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act in 2016, which has expanded the number of disabilities to be 2020 to 21. We have the education policy, which says right to education for all. Very recently in June and August 2022, UGC and the AICTE, which is the technical education body, have issued very extensive guidelines on how to make higher education inclusive and accessible for people with disabilities. So the laws are there. The question is, are we ready to make sure that we are using these laws? Just want to share a few ground realities. So if there are people with disabilities that you know, it's important for you to know that some institutes across India have started taking positive steps forward, right? So there is a body called the Inclusive Universities Alliance, which is a group of colleges in India which want to be inclusive, and they are trying to share experiences with one another. The members of this alliance are colleges like St. Xavier's College, Bombay, Ashoka University, near Delhi, IIT Madras, in fact, closer home to where all of you are. They've started taking some really good steps to make their campus inclusive and accessible. There's IIT Delhi, IIM Bangalore, Azim Premji University, IIT Kanpur, Triple IT Bangalore. Now, as people with disabilities, we always fear that, people fear that will we get access? Now, these are some of the leading institutes in the country that are wanting to be inclusive, and sometimes places like Ashoka University, Azim Premji University are private universities, but they also make scholarships available for adults with disabilities. So we should not worry that because they are private universities, education will be expensive. It is not. And these campuses are finding it difficult to get people with disabilities on campuses because of this misconception. So through your networks, do spread the word around that these colleges, if people are seeking higher education, then these are colleges that they could access. Triple IT Bangalore has this master's program in digital society, which is trying to look at making inclusion and accessibility mainstream. So they are in fact looking for adults with disabilities to specifically apply for these master's program where they could also take up advocacy in jobs in companies that are looking at accessibility as a career. So these are some of the ground realities of inclusive education in India. If there are people with disabilities that you know of or they are part of this audience right now, I feel that every person with disability needs to ask themselves whether they are independent, right? And what is their idea of independence? Oftentimes, people with disabilities are forced to believe the society's ideas of independence. If I am a person with blindness and if I'm using a reader, I'm not dependent on that person. That is the way I function. If tomorrow I had to use a robot, would I feel that I'm dependent on someone? No. So I'm using another human being to take assistance is not necessarily dependence. If there is no accessibility in the environment, and if that is the only way I get access, we should not believe that we are dependent if that's the social and environmental limitation that we have to operate in, right? And I think oftentimes individuals with disabilities don't get enough time to reflect on what their own attitude towards their own condition is. Because we live in society that tends to sympathize, we tend to live in society which tends to either make you a hero or over sympathize. Somewhere we are not able to figure out what our own emotions about the condition itself is, right? And to distinguish our identity is separate from the condition that one has. Like I might have asthma and I don't necessarily make that into my identity, but because disability lands up standing out all the time and because people land up making your condition the only identity, subconsciously, I've often seen adults with disabilities landing up making their condition to be their identity. And that is something we don't want. You want to be making decisions in your life based on who you are and not based on the condition that you have. So if you are good with dancing, then that's what you're good at. If you enjoy working with people, that's who you are. What is your personality is far more important than the condition that you have, right? And similarly for caregivers and NGOs as well, it's very, very critical to encourage self-discovery and self-advocacy as much as possible. To distinguish between care, concern, and dependency. As a person without disability, when you engage with a person with disability, please ask yourself, what is the basis of that interaction? Is it too much concern? Is it care? Is it creating dependency, or is it creating independence? As organizations, when you have projects, it's important to reflect and ask yourself, what is this project going to do for this person 3 years down the line? Is this driven towards making this person independent? Or is this going to create more structures of support? And that is something that one must, that there is this thing, right, in disability rights, nothing for us without us. Are your programs curated by adults without disabilities, or they are curated with people with disabilities to identify what is relevant and important for them? And to separate emotions from facts while advocating for change, right? Living with disabilities in a society which is not accepting can be very, very frustrating. And yet, when we are trying to seek change in the system, we can't let emotions drive our projects. We need to let facts and objective things that work for the entire system drive change. So that's where I'd like to sort of end and just tell you a little bit about what Spandan does. Spandan as a consultancy service is trying to work with 3 sectors, one which is education, second employment, and third knowledge. We believe that not enough higher education institutes are yet ready to be inclusive, which is causing a gap between skilled people with disabilities and the employment opportunities that could open up for them. And we feel that the 2 sectors are not connected because there is not enough research, not enough documentation to connect these 2 sectors. So the work that we do is try to build the linkage between education, employment, and knowledge. And the way we do this is to work with colleges and higher education institutes and encourage them to make their systems inclusive, reach out to employers and encourage them to look at inclusive campus hiring and look at building inclusion within their systems, and simultaneously work on action research and documentation or whichever partner that we would like to work with. We believe that if we do this, then inclusion can become sustainable and effective. So we have like these 5 products. Basically, we offer consultancies across these 5 key verticals. One which is called Samavesh, which is inclusion policy building support. Second is a people management system called Saral. The third is a list of support services that any organization might want to set up, which is called Sahyog. These are essential for people with disabilities to participate to their fullest, right? I can't have a college which says, I will not make my exams accessible, but you come to college. That is not going to allow a student to participate fully. So you need to create these support services. And then there is environment. So how do you make the environment more inclusive and accessible? That is through SART. And then, of course, research, which is the work that we also like doing. So that is called Shod. So I think with that, I'd like to pause. Would be happy to answer questions. I'm reachable on these contacts, both in terms of email ID and phone numbers. If you know of organizations, especially higher education institutes who want to make their campuses inclusive and accessible, feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to help. Also happy to answer any other questions right now. Any questions that anybody has?
Ma'am, you have mentioned about the inclusion for children with learning disability. So do you help them, there are some children who struggle appearing for boards. Do you support them as well?
Yeah, so my work primarily is more at the organization level, and with individuals, I can offer them guidance and support in terms of where to go. I don't
Okay.
direct training with any of the students, but I
Okay.
know enough organizations where they can go for training. And with regards to giving them information, regards to rules, regulations, and things like that, I can definitely help.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Yes.
Ma'am, what's the area in which you, I mean, geographical area in which you work? Is it restricted to Delhi or you have contacts all over India?
Yeah, I'm actually based out of Bombay, I'm not
Okay.
from Delhi.
I'm sorry. I'm
And
sorry. I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. And I work with institutions across India. So, like, I work with IIT Madras, for example. So I'm location agnostic, especially post COVID era. It's become a lot more easier to work across different locations.
Thank you.
Okay, I think Shweta, we could hand it over to you. I think if there are no further questions.
Do you help corporates or companies also make their workplaces accessible?
Yes, so I'm just sorry, who's asking that question? I'm not sure.
Sandeep.
Yes, hi Sandeep. Yeah, so corporates and companies have just started. I mean, as I said, right, Spandan is relatively new. It's just about a couple of years, a couple of months old. But I've started reaching out to companies. There are already a lot of organizations who are working with companies to have employment accessibility. So if your group has people with disabilities who are finding it challenging to seek employment, then I'd be happy to connect you to those organizations, because actually with corporates right now, the challenge is they are not able to find good candidates. Most corporates, because of the international push that they have a very number driven D&I mandate where they need to recruit people with disabilities, and they are not able to find enough people. So in fact, there's a supply chain issue there. So if there are adults with disabilities, who are qualified and are having a challenge with employment, feel free to reach out. I can connect you with specific organizations that are always in the search for good profiles.
Sure. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Ma'am, thank you for your wonderful presentation. You opened my eyes and revealed a lot of things which I had a different thought about, especially that talking about diversity and why not. And another thing is that you use the term disability is the largest invisible group. Yeah, that was really eye-opening.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? Thank you so much. Thank you, Neha, for this session and giving all the information and sharing the knowledge with us. And thank you so much for this day. And also the activity which Malti has mentioned here, the sheep thing, and also about telling the women were also like that and how it has changed. So it was very eye-opening. And thank you for the session today. So anyone has any doubts, you can reach out to me, and also you can also share your feedback as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Pleasure meeting all of you and wish all of you the very best.
Thank you.